Funding for Election 2012 coverage is provided in part by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association, 87,000 strong in North Dakota, dedicated to enhancing quality of life for all as we age. And by the members of Prairie Public.
Hello and welcome to Election 2012 coverage on Prairie Public. I'm Matt O'Lean. This is the debate for the office of North Dakota Governor. Our guests today are the current governor of North Dakota, Jack Dalrymple, who is the Republican nominee for this year, and State Senator Ryan Taylor from Towner. He is the Democratic nominee for governor. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. We will have a 1-minute opening statement and 1-minute closing statement at the start and the end of the show. That's been determined by a coin flip. In between, there'll be topics and questions selected by myself and AARP that I will throw out for discussion. Based on a coin flip, Governor Dalrymple goes first on a 1-minute opening statement. Governor?
Matt, thank you very much. And thanks to Prairie Public Broadcasting and to AARP for this great debate opportunity. You know, North Dakota these days is a great place to live. A great place to live, to raise a family, to work. And as we look forward, we have a great opportunity for it to become an even greater place to build a wonderful quality of life. In order to do that, we're going to need a governor who has, I think, the experience and the knowledge and the understanding of state government to lead us into this period of incredible growth in our future. And all of that is going to require someone who understands the challenges that we're going to meet. We do have great challenges, and we are meeting these challenges, and we are facing the challenge every day of the week. Rebuilding roads, providing housing, providing flood control, providing water and sewer and law enforcement, all of these things we can do. And at the same time, because of our great resources, we will be able to lower taxes in the future.
Okay.
Property taxes
1 minute,
and income taxes.
That's 1 minute. Okay.
Thank you.
1 minute opening statement, Senator Taylor.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks to Prairie Public Television. Thanks to AARP, and thanks, Jack. Glad you could make it. I'm a fourth-generation cattle rancher. I was first elected to the state Senate 10 years ago and was elected the Senate Minority Leader in the last session. 9 years ago, I married a beautiful McKenzie County woman, and together, Nikki and I have been blessed with 3 children, and their ages are 8, 6, and 4. I'm running for governor because our state is at a crossroads. We have tremendous opportunities given to us by our God-given resources, and we all sense that North Dakota is changing. But we don't want everything to change. We don't want our quality of life to change for the worse. We don't want to lose our sense of safety or our sense of community. I believe it'll take energetic, visionary leadership to get us through this special time with our values intact. That's how we look at the issues, and that's why I'm looking forward to the debate of those issues today.
Okay, let's get right to the issues. New estimates, gentlemen, put North Dakota's budget surplus at $1.6 billion approximately. A lot of states would do lots of things for problems like this or benefits like this, I should say. How would you manage this surplus if elected in terms of what to spend, what not to spend, and how do you differ from your opponent on how you would manage this issue? Senator Taylor, you start first.
Well, the budget surplus is certainly great, and it's not what defines us in North Dakota, but there's certainly a lot of money to work with. I realize that the budget surplus didn't come for free. We certainly realize that there are needs out there. I believe in realistic plans. I wouldn't have called for a zero increase budget when our state is growing and the needs are growing amongst our citizens as the governor did. We have plans that we've laid out throughout this campaign, looking at priorities. Property tax relief that has been called for, taking care of infrastructure needs in the West, leaving more money in the West immediately so that they can start to prevent problems rather than wait for crises to develop and then have to try and rebuild infrastructure after it's been destroyed. And I believe we need to have a good portion of the surplus invested in the next generation, because it's the education of our children that creates the workforce and creates the minds that'll take us to the next economy after oil.
Okay, Governor Dalrymple, response?
Matt, first of all, for the cash reserves that we are generating in the current biennium, $1.6 billion, as you mentioned, the best use of that money is to invest in our infrastructure in North Dakota. That money is going to go into roads, highways, housing, flood control and water supplies, things that will be long-term valuable investments for the future of North Dakota. As we look ahead into the 2013-15 biennium, we see that we will also have a surplus of funds during that period. And that's when we have to look at additional one-time investments for that money and look carefully at what we can do on an ongoing basis. Senator Taylor, you've mentioned that I've called for a hold even or no spending increase. I believe that that has been misleading people. You're a state legislator. You know that when you ask for the accountants to show you what a budget would look like if it was held even, that is not the same thing as saying that I want no spending increases. The way the budget process works, agencies can ask for any budget increase that they want, and the governor then considers what that will be. It's very important that we give our agency directors an opportunity to recommend what will happen in the future to their spending needs, and we will respond to them.
Need to get a response, Senator Taylor.
You know, and on that very topic, it's a point where I'm not sure that Jack gets it, that when you call for a zero increase budget, it's not realistic. Certainly within the budgeting process, you can ask for optional funding requests. But I've been in the Senate for 10 years, and I know that if you tell some of these folks that things are optional, they're going to believe you. And the increases that we need, the growth that we have in North Dakota, it takes real resources. And I would ask my agency heads to go out there and give me a realistic budget, and if it has an increase in it, if it calls for more people, if it realizes that the workforce that they're trying to attract costs more than it did years ago, if the materials that they're asking for cost double what they did years ago in terms of some of our construction costs, let's keep it real. And let's make sure that we keep the morale up within our departments and the people that are working for the state of North Dakota.
Okay, Governor Dalrymple, response?
Well, Senator Taylor, you were never a member of the Appropriations Committee, so you didn't deal with budgets directly, but even you should know that throughout the entire history of North Dakota budgeting, we have provided the opportunity for all agencies to request spending increases. That's the way the process works. And virtually every time we go through a budget cycle, we ask people to show us what would the budget look like if there were no additional funds available. This is an important budgeting exercise, understanding what the needs are versus where we've been, and it's strictly something for the accountants to show the leadership. Obviously, we will see increases because we have an increasing economy, a growing economy, and we will have greater needs as we go forward.
Okay, let's move to North Dakota's surging energy and oil industry, gentlemen. A recent poll from the UND Geography Department found nearly 60% of longtime residents who live in oil country that were surveyed say that their style of life is worse now than before the oil boom. These are longtime residents that were polled. How do each of you, if elected, plan to manage the industry, the speed at which it's processing, coupled with infrastructure needs for communities like the people that we surveyed, and how do you differ from your opponent on this matter? Governor, you start first this time.
Well, Matt, I think it's very important that the state respond promptly and aggressively to the increasing needs that people have in western North Dakota. And we have been doing that. As soon as I took office as governor, we increased the amount of resources from the state going to western North Dakota. Currently $1.2 billion going to the 17 oil and gas producing counties for roads, highways, more housing infrastructure, more law enforcement, and more emergency services. This is the way that the state can help these areas move forward. In addition to that, we have also provided more money for county and township roads. We've had a special energy impact fund that allows money to go directly to the most needy places. This response is taking place right now, and going forward, I'm proposing an even greater commitment to infrastructure statewide, not just in oil country, but $2.5 billion to address infrastructure needs statewide.
Okay, Senator Taylor, response.
Well, Matt, quality of life in the West is a concern, and they're telling us that. And I see that and I hear that when I travel the West, where my wife comes from and where many of the people that are my friends live. You know, when we look at the response that has been, there's certainly some big numbers, but they're not big enough. The speed of the deployment of these resources, the fact that the money is coming into Bismarck, and then we're going to brag about the money that sits in Bismarck, doesn't solve the problem. The fact that 11% of the dollars, according to Headwaters Economics, are staying in these communities immediately is not enough. We would ask for at least 40% of those dollars to stay directly in the communities so that they can prevent problems, not come hat in hand to Bismarck to ask for a grant 12 months or 18 months later. That's the difference between Jack and I on this issue. I want to get the resources there immediately for these local leaders to put them on the ground and start to get in front of some of these issues, not have to come to Bismarck after the damage has been done. We have to take care of these communities. This is where the wealth has come from. It's morally the right thing for us to do.
Governor Dalrymple, response.
Well, I have asked for an increase in the counties and cities' share of the oil production tax distribution. I feel that that is warranted, and I think that we need a larger minimum to each county, as well as a higher percentage in the high-producing counties. But the fact of the matter is, right now, we are sending out money on a very prompt basis through the Oil Impact Fund to political subdivisions that have extreme needs. Some of those grants are dispatched as quickly as 30 days to the needy town or the needy township or county or wherever it may be. It's an excellent way to address immediate impacts, and I think as we go forward, we will want to keep that feature as well as increased distributions through the oil and gas formula.
Okay, final response on this issue to Senator Taylor.
Again, I trusted leaving it there in the first place rather than asking them to come in and ask for it back. I think that is the best way to get ahead of some of these issues. And when we look at our system, a 2-year biennial system, which I've supported in the past, with the speed of things going right now, it's almost an eternity. And the governor has the ability and has the power to call a special session of the legislature to start to implement these very remedies much quicker than we have been. I think it's time for us to exercise that right and that responsibility because this is moving extremely quickly. The dollars need to get there sooner, and often in this case it's been too little and too late.
Okay, our next question, we're going to move on, comes from our debate co-sponsor, AARP of North Dakota. For both of you, will you support the expansion of Medicaid within North Dakota that is available under the Affordable Care Act, also now known by both sides as Obamacare? Senator Taylor, you go first on this issue.
Matt, I have supported that, and if we look at the goal of the Affordable Care Act here, in North Dakota we still have a significant number of uninsured people, still need health care, still need to be able to see a doctor. We have the ability through the Medicaid program to cover more of those uninsured people. The federal government will be helping in that effort, and I certainly believe that we ought to do just that. Get people the care that they need. Get them to a provider. That we have great providers in our state. We have wonderful hospitals, doctors, and nurses. This is a matter of helping them get the care that they need, oftentimes preventative care, which will save us money long run.
Okay, Governor Dalrymple, response.
Well, Matt, we need to make a tremendous commitment to Medicaid in North Dakota as we have in the past, and I believe that we should continue to do that. It's a very important program, especially for our state where we have a high proportion of senior citizens. Medicaid expansion is definitely something that we should agree to if it comes forward on the terms that the federal government has proposed, which is that they will pay 100% of the cost of a Medicaid expansion. But as you know, there are questions right now whether that's even possible when the federal government has not identified any funding anywhere in any budget that would cover the cost of that. This is some of the lack of credibility that we have right now with our federal government proposing programs like Obamacare that show no signs whatsoever of being funded. In North Dakota, however, we have stepped up and done everything that we need to do for Medicaid. In this coming biennium, because of the cutbacks in what the federal government will do for Medicaid, the state of North Dakota is looking at needing to spend an additional $150 million in general funds for Medicaid. That's a commitment that we will make, and I have told people that, and I believe that's why I've been endorsed by the Long-Term Care Association, who understands the importance of Medicaid to their people.
Okay, I need a response from Senator Taylor.
we need to take care of our own. And the policies that I've put forth, and this would be no different than other policies we've put forth, whether it's property tax relief or others, North Dakota can and should take care of its own. This is one way that we can do that in partnership with the federal government, knowing exactly how important those dollars are. And I understand as well or better than most how important those dollars are to our elderly residents of the state who've made their life and their career here, who are in long-term care, where a lot of these dollars end up. I think the people of North Dakota can always count on me to make sure that I not only understand, but I will fight for them every day to get the care they need. And I won't let political wrangling get in the way of what's the politically acceptable thing to do when it comes to an issue like this, which is wrapped up in the Affordable Care Act.
And final response on this issue, and then we'll move on. Governor Dalrymple.
Well, again, Medicaid is an incredibly important program for North Dakota because of the demographics that we have. The state of North Dakota has supported it 100% in the past, and we will be there 100% in the future.
Okay, let's move on. If elected, what are each of your top priorities for the 2013 legislative session, and how would you differ with your opponent on some of these priorities? Governor Dalrymple, you start this one.
Well, the priorities, would be a long list, Matt, and, I'll try to cut it down to the main ones. As I've already said, for the cash reserves that we have accumulated, infrastructure investment is key in North Dakota. Throughout our state, not just in western North Dakota, we know that our roads can use additional investment. There's been a tremendous amount of economic activity. Agriculture is doing extremely well. A lot of our roads are really not built to take the kind of loads and the kind of traffic that they have today. We need to make those investments for the long term, and I am proposing statewide $2.5 billion for that purpose. As we look into the regular session, I believe that we can provide additional tax relief as well. I have already made a proposal that we reduce property taxes by an additional $400 million. That would be done by taking the average school levy in North Dakota and cutting it in half to 60 mills and having the state provide the remainder of the cost of education for that purpose. I've also proposed a reduction in income taxes for individuals. I've also proposed an expansion of the homestead tax credit to allow senior citizens to stay in their homes even if they have incomes ranging as high as $50,000. And I don't believe that we should be deducting or taking into consideration Social Security income for the homestead tax credit or any savings that people have put together before that.
Okay, for time fairness, I need to get Senator Taylor to respond.
Well, Matt, when we look at the priorities, I think it'll all revolve around protecting and preserving the quality of life that we have in North Dakota. That is tied to infrastructure and what we'll do for infrastructure spending in the state of North Dakota. Not only roads, not only schools, but also things like law enforcement, where we're not keeping pace with the growth that we have in the state of North Dakota. The rate of crime has risen 3 times greater than the number of crime fighters that we've been putting out there. That's our responsibility as a state to make sure we get those resources out there. I think you'll find differences between Jack and I when we look at what we're going to do for the future, and I talk about education. And in the first debate, as we talked about $25,000 average student loan debt in North Dakota, Jack's response was that it was too bad. Well, it's too bad that we don't have more plans going forward to make sure that that burden is less so that families can afford to send children to trade school and college in North Dakota, because that's the workforce that'll lead us forward into the next economy. Ellen Chaffee, my own in-house nationally recognized expert, running mate for Lieutenant Governor, who was president of Valley City State, we have plans to reduce student loan debt by half. Not to give a freebie, but to make sure that they have the resources to know that they can go to college. Our property tax relief plan was laid out in June, long ago, and we see a catch-up in the campaign once in a while. Ours targets, as a homestead credit, getting the dollars to our North Dakota residents. Again, North Dakota taking care of its North Dakotans, to make sure that we pinpoint the property tax relief dollars to those who have their homes in North Dakota. We believe in that going forward, and those are some of the priorities, many to list, but they'll all be about improving our quality of life.
Okay, Governor Dalrymple, response.
Well, Senator Taylor brought up the topic of scholarships, and I'm glad he did, because Senator, you have tried to spin a comment that I made about scholarships to make it sound that I don't care about students graduating with student debt. And you know that's not the case. The fact of the matter is it would be nice if there were no student debt whatsoever when students graduate from college. But that's not the way the system works, and today the use of student loans is very common. The fact of the matter is I led the way to increase substantially the student financial aid based on need in the 2009 session to over 300% increase over what it was before. We have at this point 2.5 times as many people eligible for needs-based student financial aid than we had in the past. I also brought forward the merit-based scholarship, which was a brand new concept, $6,000 per student if you perform well in high school and receive the right score on the ACT test.
Okay, Senator Taylor, final word on this issue, and then we'll have time for one more issue.
Certainly some more numbers, but the fact remains that student loan debt is still increasing in North Dakota, and it still is at $25,000 average. It's a matter of understanding. And I'm not spinning the words, they're just the words that Jack said, and it's just, you know, where it was. The fact is the matter that I certainly understand the challenges that these students go through, and I want to help. And we have the ability to help in a much greater fashion than we have right now. The talk about the past is just that, it's about the past. We need to do more going forward to make sure that it's still within reach of our students.
Okay, one more issue, and that's water. Water issues remain a huge issue here in the state. Minot still recovering. A new East End outlet near Devil's Lake appears to be working, but as Valley City and other residents worry downstream, and Fargo is, of course, still seeking a permanent diversion. What are each of your approaches to the state's water problems and issue? You'll each have about 1 minute on this. Senator Taylor, you go first this time.
Matt, there certainly have been issues statewide across it. I'm just 60 miles from Minot, so we certainly saw the devastation there. There's still a lot of work to be done left in Minot. There's still millions of dollars left to do in the recovery. Again, the state has the ability to take care of our own. I think the state should have played and can still play a larger role in that recovery. We certainly appreciate the help of the federal government, but the state could have and should have done more. And it's not about just giving a loan to some of these people who've lost a great amount of equity. It's about stepping in with even more meaningful help that will get them back on their feet. Devil's Lake and the Cheyenne River Valley, my style of leadership, we'd be bringing all of these people together because it is a basin-wide issue, and it's going to have to revolve around state help along with the federal government. That's not only about retention, but also about managing and helping the cities handle greater flows of water. Fargo needs and deserves flood relief. Can't continue to throw sandbags, but again, it's a community-wide effort that looks at both retention and protection.
Okay, 1 minute response, Governor Dalrymple, and then we'll move to closing statements.
Matt, I think one of the great challenges that faced me as governor when I took office was the unexpected flood events of 2011. And I've been deeply involved in that ever since they began to occur. Betsy and I went to places in North Dakota that were under severe attack from rising waters. Many people evacuated their homes. It was a very difficult situation. We walked the dikes with the National Guard. We helped people, and we brought people together that could bring the response that was needed at that time. Today, we are spending a tremendous amount of money in North Dakota responding to flood and creating flood control projects. In Minot, the effort has been tremendous, and there will need to continue to be more effort going into the future. There's no question about that.
We do need to get to closing statements. I know it goes very, very fast. You can pick up on that if you want, Governor. Senator Taylor, you go first. 1 minute closing statement.
Well, thank you. This is certainly a critical time in the history of our state. It's one that's full of opportunity that we can't take credit for, opportunity given to us by our natural resources. But it also comes with challenges. It comes with challenges to our quality of life, and it comes with questions about what we do and where do we put this windfall from our one-time harvest of these natural resources. If we don't make smart investments today, if we don't lead with the energy and the commitment to both our heritage and our destiny, we risk North Dakota becoming just like a lot of other places. Places that many of us have passed over or turned down to live here and call ourselves North Dakotans. I invite fellow North Dakotans to make the comparisons between the two of us in this race And ask yourselves, as you do the research, whose ideas are better, whose vision is stronger, and whose passion is greater for this special place that we call home. If you do that, I'm also asking you for your vote. Not only asking for your vote, but I'm asking to earn your vote.
Okay, that's 1 minute. Thank you, Senator. Governor Dalrymple, 1 minute closing statement.
Matt, thanks, and thanks for organizing the debate. North Dakota is in an incredible time in its history. There are tremendous opportunities for people to build a wonderful quality of life. And as governor, I have learned that people in North Dakota are incredibly resilient, resourceful, and very determined to bring about a quality of life for their future that really will be second to none. I think that in order to achieve that, we'll need a governor who has the experience, who has the knowledge, who has the understanding of government matters to make this all come about. And I'd like to say to everybody in North Dakota, I believe that working together, I can provide this knowledge and this decision-making ability, and in the future, we will succeed. I ask for your vote on November 6th.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. The election day is November 6th. Thank you for watching Prairie Public's coverage of election 2012. So long.
Funding for Election 2012 coverage is provided in part by AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association, 87,000 strong in North Dakota, dedicated to enhancing quality of life for all as we age, and by the members of Prairie Public.